Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go on a virtual field trip to Ellis Island. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ellis Island is located on an island between New York City and New Jersey. It ran from 1892 till about 1924, and what happened was immigrants would come over by steamship looking for a new life to start in America. This virtual field trip also deals with, we go actually to the museum located on the island currently and get to talk with some really cool people, so I hope that you enjoy.
When you think of the iconic New York City skyline, it's almost impossible not to think of the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island. But did you know that less than half a mile northeast of Liberty Island sits a second small island that has played an extraordinary role in shaping the culture and history of the United States of America? Hello, my name is Billy DeMichelle, your host for today's scholastic virtual field trip, Coming to America. And I'm coming to you from the heart of New York City's harbor on Ellis Island, operated by the National Park Service.
Now, for those of you who don't know, nearly half of all Americans have at least one ancestor who came through Ellis Island. And the really cool thing we'll get a chance to do later, we'll go to ellisisland.org and we'll actually get to do a passenger search.
From 1892 to 1924, Ellis Island was the gateway for millions of immigrants in the United States, and today we'll walk in the footsteps of some of those immigrants and learn their stories. We'll hear from the National Park Service Rangers as they share the rich history of Ellis Island and what life was like coming to America. We'll also tour the Ellis Island Immigration Museum located right behind me.
Now, can anyone make any guesses as to what life was really like passing through Ellis Island? Think about that and then we'll see if you're correct when we continue.
The main building of the Immigration Station complex. So there's a lot to cover today, and I know you're just as excited as I am to get started, so let's begin. The United States has always been and continues to be a nation of immigrants. And it was right here on Ellis Island between 1892 and 1924 that some 12 million immigrants passed through the building behind me on their way to a new life in the United States. Some came in search of economic opportunity, others to escape political or religious oppression. Some immigrants came to rejoin family members. They all shared a common desire to build a better life for themselves and their families. As it stands today, Ellis Island is the symbol of the story of immigration and the cultural richness of this nation. Now, beginning in 1892, all third-class and steerage passengers arriving by steamship to the Port of New York came through Ellis Island. Most came from countries in southern and eastern Europe, like Turkey or Greece, Armenia and Hungary, and nearly 4 million came from Italy alone. For millions of immigrants, often several thousand a day, 7 days a week, Ellis Island was their first introduction to America.
Now, just a little recap. Ellis Island actually was named after Samuel Ellis, who purchased it and set up shop as a tavern owner. Before immigration, it housed military weaponry and ammunition. Now, you'll learn later on that those who were sick or who had criminal records that came through the posts at Ellis Island were sent back or held until they were well, and sometimes, unfortunately, these folks were held there for weeks at a time until they could get well.
Before immigrants could begin their new life in America, they walked up this very path and through the doors which we're about to enter together today. And can you imagine coming to a foreign country, not speaking the language, with very few belongings? That's what it was like for many immigrants when they first arrived, and this is where it all started.
Now, can you guys stop and make any inquiries about how do you think they felt? How would you feel if you went to France or if you went to Italy and you didn't speak the language and no one spoke your language? Would you feel scared, anxious? Think about that and we'll find out how they felt later on.
So let's go back in time, inside this historic museum, and relive their first experiences. Okay, imagine you're brand new to this country. You walk into this huge building. There are so many people. And a total stranger in uniform starts telling you what to do. Scary, right? Well, when immigrants entered the building, they were directed to the baggage room, where they left their trunks and suitcases and baskets, and then made their way to this staircase. Now, although it isn't the original, this modern staircase was built for the museum to remind us that it played a very important role in the Ellis Island inspection process. You see, what many immigrants didn't know was that climbing the steps was the first part of the process on Ellis Island. And and that there were doctors already observing them from the second floor to ensure that they appeared physically healthy. Once they got to the top of the stairs, they entered the main hub of the immigration station called the registry room, or the Great Hall. Great because it could hold the population of an entire village from the old country. It was here in the registry room that all immigrants were inspected and questioned to determine whether they were fit to enter the country or whether their case required further review. Now, as immigrants entered the Great Hall, doctors conducted a 6-second physical examination, checking them for problems walking or breathing, signs of heart trouble, infectious diseases, mental illness, anything that might make them a public health risk.
Now, why do you think that the Americans would want to check for a public health risk before allowing them into the United States? Think about that.
They were suspected of any illness. They were marked with a piece of chalk and pulled out of the line for further examination. The Great Hall was lined from end to end with hard wooden benches. Now, immigrants waiting in line moved slowly but steadily towards an inspector waiting for them behind a desk, much like this one, where eventually their name would be called and they were asked a series of questions like, where were you born? What's your occupation? Who paid your passage? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? How much money do you have? And through it all, they wondered, will I be allowed to enter America? After the physical exam and all those grilling questions, immigrants found themselves here at the top of these stairs, otherwise known as the Stairs of Separation. They were faced with 3 separate possibilities. The aisle on the right was for immigrants who were cleared and traveling further west or south.
Towards
This left
California,
staircase was the
Florida.
path to New York City and points north. The center aisle, now, that was the one to be feared. For those immigrants being detained for legal or medical reasons, this center staircase led to the dormitory or hospital where they were faced with a longer stay on Ellis Island, one that could easily stretch into days or even weeks. Those not passing inspection would have a final opportunity to have their case heard before a board of inquiry in one of 3 hearing rooms. And waiting for me inside this hearing room are 3 National Park Service Rangers who will tell us all about what coming to America was like for so many immigrants. Let's go inside. Hey guys.
Hey, Billy.
How are you?
Great.
Well, we just finished our tour of the Immigration Museum, and now we're going to find out more about what coming to America was like for millions of immigrants, and to do that, we need you. So I want everybody watching to welcome National Park Service Rangers Catherine Crane, Peter Wong, and Melissa Magnuson Kennedy. Hey, welcome. Actually, I should say welcome here, right? This is actually the very first virtual field trip to Ellis Island. Now, I know you guys are the experts when it comes to Ellis Island, but
Now I want you guys to notice the trunk located right back here. Think about how many clothes you could fit in that trunk, and think about what that trunk could have been used for when they brought it over.
before we dig deeper into some of the historical events that took place here, I want everybody watching to really understand what the National Park Service is and the very important job that you guys do as National Park Service Rangers.
Well, the mission of the National Park Service is to preserve and protect those very special places that are unique. They make up our cultural and historical heritage and embrace our natural wonders. So we want to take care of these places, and as park rangers, we also want to invite everyone to come out and personally visit them and experience them themselves.
Well, speaking of national parks, there are a number of them across the country. About how many?
We're almost to 400.
And what are some of the really famous?
You've heard of Yellowstone, the very first one.
That's right.
If you go south, you'll find Everglades. Way up north on the East Coast is Acadia. Out west is Mount Rainier.
Very cool. Now, you know, the National Park Service has worked really hard to preserve the cultural value of this site, Ellis Island. And I know most of us think of Ellis Island as an immigration station, but what we don't know is that there is a really interesting history. For example, the wooden structure that was built in 1892 to house the immigration station actually burnt down 5 years later, and it took another 3 years to rebuild what is this modern site we're in right now, this building that we're in, and that opened in 1900. Now, Michelle Higgins, third grade class from Midland Elementary School in Paramus, New Jersey, is watching today. Hey guys, and they want to know what was on this island before it became an an immigration station. Let's watch.
Now guys, I talked a little bit about this earlier before the movie began. Can anybody recall what Ellis Island was used for and who owned it before it became the gateway to the United States for immigrants?
Our class is here in Fremont, New Jersey. We know some of Ellis Island is in New Jersey and the rest of it is in New York.
Can you tell us a little about Ellis Island before it was run by the government? What roles did it play in history?
Well, it had a lot of roles in history. When the Native Americans were here, there was a great bountiful harvest in the harbor of fish. So they were fishing out here on the island, and they referred to it as the name of Gull Island, is how we would say it today. Later on, it was a place where there was a private tavern. They were hanging pirates for a little while. Called it Anderson Island or Pirate Island.
Wow.
And we know it because the last private owner was Samuel Ellis. So Ellis's Island became Ellis Island, and that's how you know us today.
Now, but in the 32 years between 1892 and 1924, what we know is that 12 million immigrants arrived and were processed through Ellis Island. Now, they came from different countries, they had different customs, different beliefs, and they spoke a lot of different languages. But they all shared one common aspiration, didn't they? To begin a new life in a new world. From all of your records, what was the journey to America like for most of them?
Well, for many immigrants, the journey was actually very long. Not only did they take that couple-week trip across the Atlantic on a steamship, but they also had to get to that port city. And so for many people, they walked. Many people took maybe horses and carts, and eventually, of course, trains to the port cities. So it was a very long journey.
Long journeys. Now, Melissa, your great-grandparents actually arrived from Sweden, right, in 1910. And they must have shared some great experiences with your grandfather, and maybe even your parents. What were some of the stories that you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. Memories are meant to be shared. And so I do know some of the stories of their lives. Unfortunately, I don't really know too many stories about their actual immigration. But from primary documents like manifests, I actually get to learn a little bit more about them. And I also have a photo of them on their wedding day. So that's really special to me.
That's lovely. All the immigrants came with luggage, and behind me here is a real trunk. I love this. It's made of pine.
It's right here, guys.
And it was owned by a Polish immigrant, I'm told, who arrived in 1912. Now, we know that before they were processed, immigrants had to actually leave the bags that they arrived with in the baggage room. Now, Gina Connell's third grade class from Leonard Elementary in Troy, Michigan. Hey, guys, they're watching. And they have a question specifically about the baggage. Let's listen.
The last time my family and I went on vacation, we could only take 1 or 2 bags on the plane with us. Was there a limit to the number of bags the immigrants could bring with them? I was also wondering what sorts of things the immigrants brought with them to America and how much money they usually came here with.
A lot of good questions there.
Yeah, absolutely. Many immigrants actually traveled to Ellis Island with whatever they could carry. You know, many traveled to America with their favorite toy, religious artifact, and a lot of other things that carried a lot of personal meaning. And while officials actually had $25 that each immigrant should carry on the manifest record, it wasn't necessarily required by law.
And since they were coming here to a new land, they literally just put whatever they could bring with them. So whatever they could fit in that trunk, that's what they brought. So there wasn't a limitation, though. It was just, what can you bring? That's what you're going to.
So that can involve picture frames, family autographs, photographs, anything like that. So those trunks that we talked about earlier were not just used for clothes. It was anything that you found that was valuable or anything that you couldn't live without in your home. Do you have any items like that in your home?
Bring with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's practical inserts.
I'm thinking that their first moments here in America have to be pretty scary, a little bit confusing. How did the Ellis Island inspectors deal with all the sort of different circumstances they were faced with? How did they actually maintain order?
Well, if you think back to the first day of school, when you're leaving school and you're going back out to get on the bus and you're not really sure where that bus is parked, everyone there is there to help you.
Okay, now ladies and gentlemen, we've ran out of time and we will finish this at a later date, but just to kind of recap on what we've learned, Ellis Island is between New York City and New Jersey. Nearly half of all the Americans have at least one ancestor who came through Ellis Island. Ellis Island was named after Samuel Ellis, who purchased it and set up shop as a tavern owner. That's how it's known as Ellis Island today. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and we'll recap later. Thanks so much.